She signed everything over while I was in the ICU. That's the first thing my brother Nolan said when I asked why my name wasn't on the will. Not, "How are you feeling?" Not, "Glad you survived." Not even a flicker of concern for the fact I had just spent 6 days in a hospital bed with fractured ribs, a bruised lung, and 48 stitches between my temple and my collarbone. Just that. She signed everything over while you were unconscious. Like it was some kind of scheduling coincidence. The will had already been filed. The ink already dry. My mother, Eleanor Ward, philanthropist, entrepreneur, and the woman who once braided my hair before piano recitals, was in the ground before I could even stand on my own again. And Nolan? He had made himself very comfortable. When I pulled up to the house, the one we grew up in, the one I hadn't even been told was already listed for private sale, his car was parked diagonally across the driveway like a throne. A realtor's sign lay flat in the grass, already half hammered in. As I stepped onto the porch, something in me knew this wasn't going to be a conversation. It was going to be an ending. Nolan opened the door before I knocked, like he'd been watching from the window. "Camille," he said, giving a nod like we were boardroom acquaintances instead of siblings. "Glad you're up and around." His tone was so casual, so unbearably composed, that I nearly choked on the air. "You didn't tell me she was sick," I said, the words bitter in my mouth. "You didn't tell me she was—" She didn't want anyone to know. She wanted peace. He stepped aside to let me in, though his eyes made it clear I wasn't expected to stay long. It happened fast. And the will. He closed the door behind me slowly. Also fast. The silence between us stretched as I glanced around the living room. It looked staged. Sanitized. The family photos were gone, replaced with abstract art. The knit blanket Mom always draped over the armchair was folded too neatly, too purposefully. I knew instantly, this wasn't a home anymore. It was a product being prepared for sale. And yet, my name was nowhere in any of it. "You left me nothing," I said quietly. He tilted his head, like I'd missed a line in a script. "She left you nothing." That's when he said it. "She signed everything over while you were in the ICU." It didn't even register at first. Like he'd spoken a foreign language, and my brain was still catching up. "You're saying she signed a full estate transfer while I was unconscious? In the hospital?" "She didn't want complications," Nolan said, turning toward the kitchen and casually pouring himself a glass of lemon water, like he wasn't rewriting our entire family history in real time. "You've been away for years, Camille. You weren't around. I was in a car accident. And I was here," he said smoothly, "taking care of everything, including her." He didn't say the last part, but it hung in the air like a gavel. I didn't stay long after that. There was no point. The lawyers had already drawn the lines. I wasn't family anymore, not in any legal sense. My name didn't exist in the paperwork, in the bank accounts, or the asset distributions. The funeral had already been held. The eulogy had already been given. By Nolan, of course. I got the voicemail hours after they'd lowered her into the ground. That night, I went back to my apartment. I hadn't even unpacked my hospital bag when I noticed the envelope. White. Sealed. My name written across the front in a trembling but unmistakable hand. It had no return address. No postage. Someone had delivered it by hand and left it at my door. Inside, a single brass key. No letter. No instructions. Just that. I held it between my fingers, heart stuttering. It looked old. Worn but polished. Like it had been used but cared for. I turned it over twice, then 3 times. No tag. No number. Just a smooth handle and solid weight. I must have stared at it for an hour. I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Some forgotten spare from a storage unit or safety deposit box. But something about it, it felt deliberate. It wasn't a gift. It was a message. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch, the envelope sitting on the coffee table like it was staring back at me. When I did dream, I dreamed of doors. Endless rows of them. All locked. All whispering things I couldn't hear. It took me 2 days to figure out where it belonged. I tried the family house, of course. Didn't fit. I tried Mom's old apartment in Fairway. Nothing. I even drove out to Dad's old office space, the one Mom held on to for years after he passed, out of nostalgia or grief. I was never sure. Nothing. And then I remembered something. A half-forgotten sentence from a conversation I hadn't thought about in years. "I used to dream of a cottage on Sycamore Hill," she had said, sipping tea on our back porch one summer night. "Just far enough out that no one would find me unless they loved me enough to look." I'd laughed at the time, thinking it was just one of her little poetic musings. She always had a flair for the symbolic. But suddenly, it didn't feel like poetry. It felt like a breadcrumb. So I searched the name. Sycamore Hill. One result. A property listed under Eleanor R. Ward Trust. 17 Sycamore Bend Road. I drove there the next morning. The road narrowed to gravel, trees arching overhead like guardians. The cottage came into view slowly, like it was revealing itself on purpose. Green shutters, stone chimney, wild vines, and old wind chimes tangled in silence. I stepped out of the car with the key clenched in my fist. Walked to the front door. Tried it. Click. The lock gave way with a soft, tired sigh, like it had been waiting. Inside was stillness. Not abandonment. Stillness. Like time had paused here. A wool throw on the couch. Books stacked in corners. A tea kettle still sitting on the stove. Lavender. The whole house smelled like lavender and something older, familiar. The silence made my ears ring. On the kitchen table sat a folder. My name again, this time in darker ink, steadier, more intentional. Inside was a single page. Camille. If you're reading this, they don't know about this house. They can't. Keep it that way until you're ready. What I left you isn't money. It's the truth. And the truth doesn't have a price. No signature. No further instructions. Just that. I sat down at the table and stared at the letter, the key still resting in my palm. Nolan had the company, the house, the accolades. But I had this key, and whatever it unlocked, it was just beginning. Before we continue, take a moment to let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to more powerful stories like this one. I didn't leave the cottage that night. Something about it felt sacred, like the air itself was holding its breath, waiting for me to decide what to do next. The rain started again around midnight, soft against the windows, as if the world outside knew it needed to be quiet. I wandered the rooms like a stranger in someone else's memory. Every corner told a story I hadn't been allowed to hear while Mom was alive. A faded quilt on the guest bed. Framed photographs that had never hung in the house Nolan now claimed as family property. And books, so many books, lined up like soldiers in open shelves, their spines cracked in ways that said they'd been read, not displayed. None of them had dust, which meant someone Mom had been here recently. Often. There was even fresh tea in a glass jar, still fragrant, not stale. I checked the expiration date on a box of crackers in the cupboard. Not even passed. She had lived here. Not just stored things. Lived. I sat down on the floral love seat near the fireplace and opened the folder again. I read her note for the 10th time. What I left you isn't money. It's the truth. And the truth doesn't have a price. The words hit different this time. I'd been so consumed with what I'd lost, what Nolan took, that I hadn't really let myself ask, what was I being given? Because whatever this was, it was intentional. It wasn't just a gift. It was a secret, one I wasn't supposed to know about. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I turned the folder over, searching for more. Tucked into a flap in the back was a smaller envelope. This one unsealed. Inside, a USB drive and a handwritten note on thick stationery. One sentence. For your eyes only. Plug in here. And beneath it, an address I hadn't seen in years. Mom's old art studio. A converted attic space above a florist shop on 5th and Juniper. She'd rented it for nearly a decade, then closed it after Dad passed. I thought she'd given it up completely. She'd told Nolan and me she'd let it go. Said it was too far to drive. But apparently, she hadn't. I closed the folder and locked the front door, then spent the rest of the night on the couch, curled in a wool blanket that smelled faintly like her perfume. At some point, I dozed off. When I woke, the light outside was pale and gray, the kind of morning that sits heavy on your shoulders before you even get out of bed. I found a clean change of clothes in the linen closet, clearly left there for me, and took the fastest shower of my life. I wasn't ready to go back to the city, but something told me I couldn't ignore that address.
Not now.
Not after everything. I drove in silence, the USB in the cup holder, my fingers trembling slightly every time I stopped at a light. Downtown was already awake when I arrived. Cafes opening their umbrellas. Joggers with headphones weaving between dog walkers. I pulled into the alley behind 5th and Juniper and stared at the side door to the attic loft. The keypad was still there. Rusty, half-faded numbers. My hand hovered. What if it didn't open? What if this was all some elaborate ghost chase, my mother's last performance piece? I punched in the code I remembered, her birthday. May 29th, 59. The light turned green. The door clicked open. The stairs creaked with each step as I climbed into the space. I hadn't been here since I was 20. It felt smaller now. The ceiling beams still slanted, sunlight filtering through the skylight she used to complain leaked in the winter. But the easels were gone. Instead, the room was clean.
Organized.
A desk sat in the middle of the floor. A laptop. No password screen. Just one open window. Insert USB. I blinked. My hand trembled as I slid the drive in. It whirred. A single file appeared. Last studio session, 2 weeks before. I double-clicked. The screen flickered. My mother's face filled the frame. She looked tired. Not sick, just tired. The way someone looks after a fight they know they've lost, but showed up to anyway. She looked directly at the camera. "If you're watching this," she said, "then you already know something's wrong." I sat down slowly, breath caught in my throat. I couldn't say it out loud. Not while Nolan was hovering. He started pushing me months ago. Said it was time to make the estate efficient. Said the lawyers needed my signature by April. April. That matched the estate transfer date he'd mentioned. But that wasn't the worst of it. She looked down for a moment, then back at the camera. He said he'd already drafted a version. Said he spoke to Dad's old attorney. Told me I didn't need to worry myself with the details. But I did worry, Camille. And when I pushed back, he got cruel. My heart was pounding. I wanted to change it back. I told the notary I'd made a mistake. I told the firm to pause all paperwork. But then I had that scare, the one that sent me to the ER. After that, they kept telling me to rest. Telling me Nolan would take care of it. I trusted him. Her voice cracked. I shouldn't have. She paused for a long moment. That's why I made a second will.
Quietly. With someone I trusted.
You'll find the details in the red file in the safe. You'll need the code. It's the number of your piano recital. The one I cried during. I remembered that day. I was 13. I'd worn a blue velvet dress. Mom wept through the whole song. Chopin. Opus 9, number 2. 0902. The video continued. They'll fight it, Camille. Nolan will say I was confused. He'll say you weren't around. He'll paint you as a bystander. But you weren't. You were the only one who ever listened. She blinked hard, tears forming now. The truth lives with you. And so does my name. The screen went black. Just like that. I sat frozen in the chair, unable to breathe. A second will. A different safe. A code hidden in a memory. This wasn't just about being left out of a will. This was about erasure. And now I had proof. The drive back to the cottage was quiet, too quiet. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't call anyone. I didn't even let myself cry. Because once you hear your mother say on camera that she was coerced into signing away her own legacy, you stop reacting and start remembering. And I remembered everything. The way Nolan always handled the paperwork. The way he insisted Mom was too fragile to have hard conversations. The way he'd practically started planning her funeral while she was still taking chemo. He always said it was out of respect. Now I knew better. By the time I reached the cottage, the afternoon light had shifted into a dusky gold. the kind that stretches shadows across the grass like long fingers. I parked at the edge of the gravel and just sat there, hands on the steering wheel, the code running on repeat in my head. 0902. My final piano recital. The night she cried through every measure. Inside the house, I walked straight to the closet in the main bedroom. The carpet had worn down in the corner, just enough to hint at foot traffic. I dropped to my knees, moved aside a small cedar trunk, and found what I was looking for. A square panel of wood, slightly misaligned. I lifted it. Beneath was a fireproof safe. Black. Combination dial. I stared at it for a moment, pulse thudding like it wanted to run away. Then I turned the dial. 0902.
Click.
The lock gave way. Inside, stacked neatly, were 5 red file folders.
Thick.
Labeled.
Dated.
The first one was titled, Revised Will, executed May 3rd, witnessed and notarized. I pulled it out with shaking hands. It was real. Her signature. 2 witnesses. A notary seal from the state of California. And right there on page 2, under beneficiaries, it said, Camille Ward, primary residential and personal effects beneficiary. Nolan Ward, executor, secondary assets only. I read it 3 times, breath catching on the word primary. This changed everything. This wasn't just an alternate version. It was dated after the will Nolan filed with probate court. It overrode the one he'd paraded in front of every lawyer and media outlet he could buy time from. This was Mom's last will, her true final word, and she'd buried it in the one place only I would think to look. Beneath that folder was more. A copy of the cottage deed, transferred solely to me. Letters of correspondence with a notary service Mom had hired on her own, and a handwritten letter dated 2 weeks before her death. The letter was short, simple, but it made my knees buckle. Camille, if you found this, then I'm already gone. But I need you to know I never forgot you. Never. I see what Nolan has become. I'm sorry I didn't stop it sooner. I let fear make my choices. But this was mine. Let them say what they want. This is my truth. And now it's yours too. I sat down on the floor, file in my lap, and sobbed for the first time since the hospital. Not just because of the betrayal, not just because of the silence, but because she had fought. Quietly,
Gently.
but she had fought. And she trusted me to carry it. I stayed there for nearly an hour before I finally stood up and laid everything out on the dining table. I took pictures, clear, time-stamped images of every page, and backed up the files to a cloud server Nolan didn't know existed. And then, because I couldn't pretend this was just about me anymore, I did the one thing I'd been avoiding. I called her lawyer. Her real one. His name was Hal Cromwell. He'd handled Dad's estate years ago, before Nolan started meddling. I found his number tucked into one of the folder sleeves, written in Mom's clean cursive with the note. Trusted. He answered on the 3rd ring. Cromwell and Associates. Hi, this is Camille Ward. Eleanor Ward's daughter. There was a pause. I was expecting this call, he said softly. My chest tightened. You were? I wasn't sure when, he added, but yes. Your mother gave me strict instructions. If you contacted me, only you, I was to provide full legal support and retain all copies of the revised documents she gave me. So, you have it? I do. The original, notarized with 2 witnesses, one of whom is on record and still practicing law in this state. The other was a hospice nurse. A surge of relief broke through me. Why didn't you say anything? Because she feared what Nolan might do if it went public too early. She asked me to hold until you reached out or until probate closed. Whichever came first. Well, probate is still wide open, I said bitterly. And now we step in. That night, Hal sent me a confirmation email with a draft of a petition to reopen the case. He said the court would review it within 10 business days, but the bigger issue wasn't legal. It was political. Because Nolan wasn't just her son. He was the face of the Ward Foundation. The visionary behind the charitable expansion, the man with friends in high places and deep pockets at local banks. And exposing him wouldn't just shift public opinion, It would rip open a whole web of carefully spun lies. That's when I made a choice. I wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. I was going to speak. Loudly.
Clearly. And with receipts.
I emailed the revised documents, encrypted, to myself, to Hal, and to an anonymous journalist I'd followed for years. Ava Lynn, a reporter known for tearing down corrupt estate battles and exposing trustees who silenced heirs. I didn't send a message with it. Just the headline I knew Nolan would hate more than anything. The forgotten daughter wasn't forgotten after all. Nolan called me at 7:16 the next morning. Not a text. Not a voicemail. A direct call. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before answering, just long enough to remind myself not to sound afraid. Hello. I assume you've been busy, Nolan said, voice clipped and businesslike. There's a lot of noise online this morning. Something about a revised will. I didn't say anything. You sent files to a journalist. Still silent. I know because Evelyn called me for comment. She seems very invested in painting me as some kind of villain. What did you tell her? That you're unstable.
Grieving.
Acting out. His voice dropped, growing colder. Camille, whatever fantasy Mom left behind in that little cottage doesn't hold up in court. You're wasting time and embarrassing yourself. I laughed. Just once. A sharp, involuntary breath of disbelief. You think I'm embarrassed? You're acting like some martyr. But the fact is, Mom made a decision. She trusted me. She named me executor. You weren't around. I was in a hospital bed. I snapped. Because of a crash, I barely survived. And you knew that. A pause. Then, you're letting emotions cloud your judgment. I'm letting the truth guide me, I said. And the truth is, she changed the will.
She documented it.
She signed it. She left a paper trail you thought I'd never find. He was quiet for a moment. Then came the words I knew were coming. You were never supposed to find that safe. There it was. Not even subtle. You knew about the cottage? I asked. I suspected she had a fallback plan, he said flatly. But she never confirmed anything. And I figured, well, if she didn't bring it up when she got sick, then maybe she'd let it go. She didn't. I'm aware now. His tone was unraveling, tight, strained, no longer smug. Good. Do what you need to do, Camille, he said after a moment. But don't forget, this affects more than just you and me. The foundation's reputation. The investors. Mom's legacy. You mean your image, I corrected. This threatens your image.
Click.
He ended the call without saying goodbye. I set the phone down and let the silence linger for a few moments. Something had shifted. Before, Nolan dismissed me.
Now?
Now he was watching me, and that meant I was finally getting close. By the time I stepped outside, the sun was high and harsh. I drove into town with a pit in my stomach. Not fear, more like adrenaline that hadn't figured out what to do yet. Ava Lynn texted me at noon. Need to meet. In person. Your story's about to get louder. She sent an address, an old bookstore cafe near the edge of town. Quiet. Neutral. Safe. When I arrived, she was already seated in the back, black coffee in hand, laptop open. She didn't look up as I sat down. Camille Ward, she said, tapping at her keyboard. Your brother tried to buy me off this morning. I blinked. What? He offered my editor a foundation sponsorship for our fall event, she said, smirking, but insisted it had to include a full media blackout on your documents. Did it work? Please. She finally looked at me, eyes sharp, assessing. I don't do silence. She turned the screen so I could see it. A drafted headline filled the top. New documents suggest Eleanor Ward was coerced into signing final will. Daughter's files spark legal review. Beneath it, side-by-side screenshots. The signature from the will Nolan submitted to probate. The notarized signature from Mom's revised will. Witness statements being reviewed. The name of the second witness, a hospice nurse named Clara Beck. I've already reached out to her, Ava said. She confirmed she witnessed Eleanor signing the revised document. She also said she was pressured by one of the family's legal reps to keep quiet about it after Eleanor's death. That name made my skin crawl. I remembered him, Harrison Dunn. Slick suit, always hovering like a shadow in our living room when Dad passed. Nolan brought him back years later. And Hal Cromwell?
I asked.
Gold mine, she said.
He's airtight.
Everything filed properly. Dated.
Logged.
He kept physical and digital copies. And he's ready to testify. I stared at the screen again. At my mother's signature. The weight of it all settled over me. You ready for this to go public? Ava asked, lowering her voice. Because once I publish this, there's no going back. I thought of the safe. The files. The way Mom's hands shook in that final video when she said, I let fear make my choices. I looked back at Ava. I don't want to ruin Nolan, I said. I just want her truth to matter. She smiled. That's what ruins him. By nightfall, I was back at the cottage. The windows glowed gold with lamplight. I hadn't planned to stay again, but something about the place held me like a quiet promise. I brewed tea, tried to read, but the energy in the air had shifted. That's when I noticed the envelope. It had been slid under the door. No postage. No return address. Just my name.
Typed.
I picked it up slowly, carefully. Inside, a single page. Cease and desist. You are hereby instructed to refrain from any and all defamatory statements, public or private, concerning the estate of Eleanor Ward and the legally designated executor, Nolan Ward. Continued dissemination of unverified claims will result in immediate legal action. It was signed, of course, by Harrison Dunn. I stared at the letter for a long time, my fingers tightening around it until the edges bent. They weren't fighting fair. They were fighting to bury me, just like they tried to bury her. But this time, I had something stronger than lawyers. I had the truth, and I had nothing left to lose. The cease and desist letter sat on the table like it was daring me to fold. But I didn't. Instead, I poured myself another cup of tea, opened my laptop, and reread every file Mom had hidden in that safe, every scanned signature, every notarized date, every line of her handwritten note. Because fear is loud, but truth is steady. And I had proof. By morning, Ava Lynn had published her article. She didn't bury the lead. Newell surfaces in Ward estate battle. Daughter accuses brother of erasing final wishes. It ran front page on the Chronicle's digital edition. Within 2 hours, it was being shared by every local media outlet. By noon, it was trending in inheritance law forums and estate justice threads. Comments poured in, some supportive, others skeptical. But it didn't matter. The story was alive. And it had teeth. I got a text from Hal around 11 a.m. Court petition filed. Review scheduled next Friday. You started the fire. Now we hold the match steady. I didn't have time to respond before a knock hit the door.
Not a letter this time.
A woman, late 50s, cropped blonde hair, blue scrubs under a beige coat. Camille? She asked, voice tentative but clear. Yes. I'm Clara Beck, she said. Your mother's hospice nurse. My breath caught. I stepped aside. Please, come in. She looked around the cottage like she was stepping into a secret she wasn't sure she was allowed to know about. She talked about this place a lot, Clara said softly. Said it was her heart's quiet. I never really understood what she meant until now. We sat at the kitchen table. The same spot where I'd read Mom's letter. The same spot where Nolan had once told me I was grieving wrong. Clara set her bag on the floor, hands folded tightly on the table. I read the article this morning, she said. And I saw your name. I recognized it immediately. You witnessed the revised will, I said. She nodded. Your mother called me 3 weeks before she passed. Said she needed someone she trusted to be present. I wasn't supposed to say anything. Her son, your brother, made it clear after she died that I wasn't to discuss anything about her estate. His lawyer even came to the hospice office. My hands clenched. You were silenced. She looked up, eyes sharp. They tried to. But the thing is, Camille, your mother wasn't confused. She wasn't fading. She was fighting. Quietly. Deliberately. I know.
There's more, Clara said.
She made me do something else. My heart pounded. What? She had me record her. The day she signed the will. What kind of recording?
A video, Clara said.
She said it was insurance. Said if her son tried to bury anything, someone needed to know she was of sound mind when she made her final decision. I felt the breath leave my body. She told me to wait, to hold it until you came forward, Clara continued. She said, Camille's voice might shake, but it never breaks. And then she made me promise. Do you still have it? Clara reached into her coat and pulled out a thumb drive in a sealed plastic bag. I've kept it in a safe at my house since the day she died. I took it with trembling hands. Can I play it now? She nodded. I walked to the living room, plugged the drive into my laptop, and waited for the screen to load. There she was.
Mom.
Sitting in a floral armchair. Hair thin from chemo but styled, face pale but focused. She looked straight into the camera. My name is Eleanor Ward. I am of sound mind and body. Today, I am executing my final and revised estate plan. No one is forcing me. No one is coaching me. This decision is mine. To my son, Nolan, if you're watching this, you've made your choices. And now I've made mine. To my daughter, Camille, this is for you. I wish I'd spoken louder when I was still strong. But I see you now. I hear you. And I trust you to carry this truth forward. She smiled. Not a sad smile. A peaceful one. The video ended. I didn't move. I didn't speak. Clara reached out and squeezed my hand. She knew what she was doing, Camille, she said. Don't let anyone tell you different. I blinked through tears. Thank you for keeping this. She wasn't just my patient, Clara said, standing. She was my friend. And friends don't let stories end wrong. By evening, the video had been sent to Hal. Ava had a copy too. She promised a follow-up article the next day. Nolan, of course, responded with a statement through his attorney. Ms. Ward is suffering from emotional distress and latching onto conspiracy theories. We remain confident that the original estate filings will stand. They were scrambling, and I wasn't alone anymore. That night, as rain returned to the vineyard and the fireplace warmed the walls of the cottage, I uploaded a private post to the memorial page Nolan had nearly shut down after Mom's funeral. I titled it, She Chose Me Too. I didn't explain much. I just attached the video. Then I let her voice do the talking. And for the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. By 8 a.m., the video had over 60,000 views. That memorial page, Nolan once used to show off foundation galas, it had become something else entirely, a forum, a battlefield, a reckoning. The comments under the post were a mess of condolences, outrage, legal jargon, and disbelief. Some people thanked me for speaking up. Others accused me of disrespecting a grieving son. But the voice in the video, Mom's voice, cut through everything. And it was spreading. I woke to missed calls from Ava, a message from Hal marked urgent, and a new email from an address I didn't recognize. Subject line: Request for immediate removal of video, legal action pending. I clicked. Ms. Ward, the video you have uploaded constitutes defamation, invasion of privacy, and dissemination of a falsified recording. You are hereby instructed to remove it from all public channels immediately. Failure to do so will result in court-ordered takedown proceedings. Harrison Dunn, legal counsel to Mr. Nolan Ward. I read it 3 times before the rage settled in. Falsified. They were calling her voice fake. Calling her fake. I barely noticed Ava's second message come through.
We need to talk. Now.
Check the Chronicle homepage. I opened the page and felt my stomach twist. Nolan Ward denies sister's allegations, questions mental fitness, reveals private medical records. There was a picture of me from 3 years ago, leaving a therapist's office after a panic attack. I'd been followed, photographed,
Archived.
The article cited unstable behavior, recent hospitalization, and long-standing emotional distance from the family. It even included quotes from anonymous family sources suggesting I had a history of delusion. They didn't just want to discredit me. They wanted to erase me. I sat frozen in the kitchen, the teacup in my hand growing cold. I could barely read the screen through the blur of anger. How did they get my medical records? That wasn't public information. Unless someone gave them access. Nolan. He had access to everything during Mom's decline. Power of attorney. Medical proxies. The hospice records. My emergency contact forms. He hadn't just stolen the estate. He was now weaponizing my trauma to silence me. I called Hal. "Did you see the article?" I asked. "I did," he said, his voice tight. "And I'm already drafting a response. But Camille, we need to be cautious. They've filed a petition to suppress the revised will, on grounds that it was created under manipulation and mental decline. They're pushing hard."
She was lucid, I said.
"You saw the video. You have the paperwork."
Yes.
"But they're creating noise."
Doubt.
"Just enough to slow the court. Can they win?" He hesitated. "Only if we let them control the narrative." I didn't respond, because I could feel it, that old instinct to shrink, to stay quiet, to avoid conflict. But I had come too far. Mom had left me the key, the letter, the file, the truth. I couldn't back down now. Still, by evening, the pressure started to crack through me. I hadn't eaten since morning. My inbox was flooded with interview requests and hate mail. My name was trending. The foundation had issued a statement denouncing unfounded conspiracies and reaffirming Nolan's leadership. And through all of it, the flip phone Mom had left me buzzed softly from the nightstand. I picked it up. One new folder had appeared on the home screen. "For Camille, in case they try to break you." I tapped it open. It was audio. Rough, quiet, recorded in what sounded like the hospice room. Mom's voice, faint but certain. "If they come for you, remember this. Nolan knows." He was in the room when I signed the revision. He even held the pen while I initialed page 3. Then he told me it would get lost unless I changed it back. I didn't. There was silence. Then a breath. Then this. If he says he didn't know, he's lying. I set the phone down gently, my chest rising and falling like a storm was inside me. He held the pen. He watched her sign. And he buried it. The recording was dated 2 days after the revised will. She'd hidden it deep. A last defense. I forwarded the file to Hal. Then to Ava. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I got in my car and drove to Nolan's estate. Not his office. His home. It was dusk when I pulled up. His driveway was filled with the cars of people pretending not to know what was going on. Caterers. PR handlers. A media advisor. I didn't bother knocking. I walked straight up the path, past the hedges trimmed to sterile perfection, and rang the bell. He answered the door with a drink in his hand, and that same smile he always wore when he knew he was wrong but thought you'd never prove it. Well, he said. "Brave of you." I held up my phone. No more lawyers. No more memos. No more lies. He didn't even look at the screen. "I'm done," I said. "You want a war?
Fine.
But I won't fight it your way." "Camille." "She left me the truth," I said. "And it's louder than you ever expected." He stepped back half a pace. Just enough to let the mask slip. "You're making a scene?" "No," I said. "I'm making history." Then I turned and walked away. The sun was nearly gone, but I felt brighter than I had in weeks. Because for once, I wasn't the one retreating. I was the one walking away from a house built on lies, toward a future finally made of something real. The courthouse smelled like old paper and cold tile, quiet, clinical, as if the air itself was trained to stay neutral. Hal and I arrived early. He had his leather briefcase, worn at the corners, and a manila folder thick with every document, file, and video we had collected. He moved with a calmness that felt borrowed. I followed close behind, my heels clicking too loudly against the marble floor, my breath caught somewhere in my chest. I wasn't scared of the courtroom. I was scared of being silenced again. The probate judge, A woman in her late 60s with a sharp nose and tired eyes called the hearing to order at precisely 9 a.m. "Ms. Ward," she said, glancing over her glasses at me, "I understand you are filing for formal review of the will previously submitted to this court, based on evidence of coercion and subsequent revision. Do you have this evidence with you today?" Hal stood and passed her the packet. "Yes, Your Honor. Including the notarized revised will, 2 witness statements, an independent legal advisor's certification of capacity, and 3 digital files." The judge flipped through it. "Very well. We'll hear opening remarks before entering evidence." I looked to my left. Nolan sat at the opposing table, hair perfectly styled, his suit dark navy, his expression unreadable. But his eyes were sharp, alert, calculating. He didn't nod. He didn't look away. Just watched me like a gambler holding 4 aces behind his smirk. "Ms. Ward," the judge said, turning to him, "you and your counsel will have time to respond after the petitioner makes her case. For now, you will remain silent." That was the only comfort I'd been given all morning. Hal began by laying out the case, calmly, methodically. He described Mom's declining health, the initial will, the growing pressure from Nolan, the secret cottage, the revised filing, the notarized signature, and the 2 verified witnesses. He ended with the video, the one where Mom sat in her chair and looked into the camera and said, "This is my final will. No one is forcing me." When the judge finished watching it, her lips pressed together. "I'd like to hear from the witnesses," she said. Clara Beck, the hospice nurse, stepped forward. Her testimony was direct, heartfelt. She spoke of the day the revision was signed, how lucid and focused Mom had been, how she'd insisted on documenting everything, how she made Clara promise to stay silent until the right time. "I believe she feared her son," Clara said, voice steady. "And I believe she trusted Camille to speak when she no longer could." Then the judge asked if we had a second witness. Hal glanced at me. I nodded. He turned to the back of the room and signaled. The door opened, and in walked someone I hadn't seen in over a decade. "Camille," Hal whispered, "I forgot to tell you, your mother found a second witness on her own. Someone who volunteered. Someone I didn't expect to answer the summons. It was Uncle Martin, my father's brother, a retired estate lawyer.
Quiet. Distant.
A man I barely remembered beyond holidays and funerals. He took the stand, cleared his throat, and said, "I was asked by Eleanor Ward to serve as a legal observer for her final estate revision. I agreed because I believed she was making the right choice." "Were you compensated?" the judge asked.
No.
"I did it because she asked, because she trusted me." "And did she appear to be in sound mental condition?" "She was more coherent that day than I've seen her in years," Martin said. "She knew exactly what she wanted, and exactly who she didn't trust." Nolan flinched. So did I. I wasn't sure if it was the mention of distrust or the fact that Martin had shown up at all. The judge made a note. "Very well. I will consider this evidence. Is there anything else the petitioner wishes to present?" I stood. Hal placed the final drive into my hand. "I have one more file, Your Honor," I said, my voice clear but quiet. A final voice message left by my mother. It was found on a backup folder she stored in a separate device. The judge gave a nod. I handed the flash drive to the bailiff. Seconds later, the courtroom filled with her voice. "If you're hearing this, it means Nolan is still trying to control the outcome. He was in the room when I signed the revision. He held the pen. Then he told me it would get lost unless I changed it back."
I didn't.
There was a pause in the recording. He'll say I was confused. But I wasn't. I was tired. And I was scared. But I was not confused. The judge let the silence linger long after the clip ended. Then she turned to Nolan's table. "Mr. Ward, your response." His lawyer stood. "Harrison Dunn." And with that same smug tone I remembered from every family business dinner growing up, he said, "Your Honor, before we proceed, we'd like to call a witness of our own. Someone with first-hand knowledge of Ms. Camille Ward's state of mind." Hal stood. "Objection. This was not disclosed prior." But the judge raised a hand. "We'll allow it." This is an evidentiary hearing, not a trial. Then Dunn turned to the side door. And that's when I saw her. Melissa. My former roommate. My best friend. Or, at least, she had been until we stopped speaking 3 years ago after a falling out I never fully understood. She took the stand like she was walking into a TV set. Hair curled. Lipstick perfect. I lived with Camille for 2 years, she began. During that time, I witnessed erratic behavior. She had difficulty managing stress, often shut down emotionally, and sometimes fabricated memories to cope. I felt the floor fall out beneath me. She claimed her mother, played favorites, and said she was being erased from the family. I tried to be supportive, but eventually, I had to step away. It was emotionally unsafe. Hal stood. Objection. This has no bearing on the validity of the will. But Nolan's team had already done what they came to do. They'd turned the courtroom into a smear campaign. The judge rubbed her temples. That's enough for today. We'll reconvene next Thursday to continue review. I'll review the evidence and determine whether a full probate reopening is necessary.
Bang.
The gavel fell. The room emptied. And I sat in the chair, frozen. Because it wasn't just Nolan who tried to silence me now. It was someone I once loved. I didn't remember driving back to the cottage. I remember white noise. My phone buzzing every few minutes with missed calls from Ava, texts from Hal, emails piling up like waves on a beach I no longer had the strength to walk. But I didn't answer any of them. I just kept driving. Past the vineyard roads and winding hills. Through the dying light of day until I reached that gravel path and the little green-shuttered house that had come to feel more like home in a few weeks than my city apartment had in years. I didn't cry in the courtroom, but I cried on the floor of the cottage, curled beneath my mother's quilt with the weight of shame pressing down like a second spine. Not because of what Melissa had said, but because, for one terrifying moment, I almost believed her. Had I imagined it all? Had grief twisted my memories? Had I taken one final act of love, Mom's gift, and turned it into a crusade she never meant for me to wage? That's what trauma does. It teaches you to doubt even the truth you can touch. But then, just after midnight, there was a knock at the door. I froze. Nobody knocked this late. The air outside had gone still. The vines rustled softly in the wind, and a low fog had rolled in over the hill, turning the world into a painting half wiped away. I opened the door slowly. No one was there. Just a small manila envelope sitting on the step. No name. No stamp. Just a red wax seal, unbroken. I brought it inside, heart thudding, hands trembling. I broke the seal. Inside was a letter, handwritten. Old paper. Faint perfume. I recognized the ink before I saw the name. It was my mother's handwriting. But the letter wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to Melissa. Melissa, if you're reading this, it means something has gone terribly wrong. I asked you to be part of Camille's support, not her silencing. I told you what I told very few people, that Camille had carried pain quietly, and that silence had cost her more than you knew. I confided in you because I believed you cared. Because I believed Camille needed someone outside the family to remind her she wasn't invisible. If they've paid you to speak against her, or if you've convinced yourself this is protection, stop. She's not delusional. She's right. The will you witnessed was the backup. The one I feared would be shredded. Camille has the original. Let her find it. Let her win. Eleanor Ward. I read it again.
And again.
And then I sank to the kitchen floor with a kind of fury I didn't know I had in me. Melissa knew. She hadn't just turned against me. She'd done it knowingly, with Mom's voice echoing in her ear. She had chosen fear. Or maybe money. Or maybe just self-preservation dressed up as concern. But whatever the reason, it didn't matter anymore. Because now I had her letter. Ava answered on the second ring. It's after midnight, she said, groggy. I have something, I whispered. A letter from my mother. Addressed to Melissa. She confirms everything. She told Melissa I had the original. She told her not to stop me. Silence on the other end. Then, email me a scan.
Now.
We go public at sunrise. By 7 a.m., Ava had posted a new article. Betrayal in the Ward case. Handwritten letter confirms Camille's claims. Implicates witness in false testimony. It exploded. The story wasn't just about inheritance anymore. It was about manipulation.
Bribery.
Witness misconduct. Ava didn't name Melissa directly, but she didn't have to. Readers connected the dots instantly. Screenshots of Melissa's social media, LinkedIn, and past involvement with the Ward Foundation began surfacing like oil on water. By noon, Melissa deactivated every account. By 3 o'clock, Nolan's attorney issued a hasty statement. We were unaware of any prior communications between Ms. Ward's mother and the witness in question. We take allegations of tampering seriously. And by 5 o'clock, Hal filed an emergency addendum to the probate court, citing misconduct, witness conflict of interest, and the existence of a second hidden will. Yes, a second. Because in that same envelope, beneath the letter to Melissa was a folded page. A will. One I hadn't seen before. Dated one day after the revision I had already submitted. It was identical, except for one paragraph. This one didn't just make me the beneficiary of Mom's personal property and the cottage. It gave me co-control of the Ward Foundation. The legacy Nolan was using to build his empire. The same legacy my mother no longer trusted him to manage alone. It was the ultimate checkmate. He hadn't just cut me out of the will. He had tried to burn the backup. And Melissa had nearly helped him.
But now?
Now, the final piece was mine. That night, I placed the two wills, side by side, on the dining table. One was notarized. One was unsigned, but clearly drafted by my mother. And both led to the same truth. She had never forgotten me. She had never left me behind. She had just hidden me somewhere safe. Until I was ready to be found. The courthouse was colder this time. Not physically. Emotionally. The kind of cold that settles into people when the truth becomes too heavy to deny. Even the clerk at the front desk looked different. Less detached. More cautious. As if they knew now that this wasn't just another estate squabble between bitter relatives. This was something else. Something historic. Hal met me outside the courtroom steps with a tight smile and a fresh folder under his arm. You ready? He asked. I didn't answer with words. I simply held up the letter. Mom's handwriting. Addressed to Melissa. With the second revised will neatly tucked beneath it. He nodded. That'll do. Inside, the room was full. Press in the back. Foundation board members along the far wall. Two unfamiliar men in dark suits near Nolan's table. Advisors, maybe. Or reputation managers. Nolan himself looked different too. Still polished, still calm, but now visibly cornered. His tie was slightly off-center. His smile didn't reach his eyes. He kept glancing toward the door like someone might still walk in and save him. But no one was coming. Not this time. The judge entered promptly at 9 a.m. She took her seat, scanned the new filings on her desk, and folded her hands. I have reviewed the emergency documents submitted by Ms. Ward and her counsel, she said, including a handwritten letter from Eleanor Ward to one of the original witnesses presented by the respondent, Ms. Melissa Reinhardt. In this letter, your mother explicitly acknowledges the validity of the revised will, along with Camille Ward's right to carry it forward. She looked up. Is that correct, Ms. Ward? I stood. It is, Your Honor. And is it also correct that this letter includes the outline of an updated estate provision that would grant you co-control of the Ward Foundation? Yes. The judge gave a small nod. Very well. As this development significantly alters the court's understanding of intent, I am ordering a formal review of both the submitted will and the revised version, alongside a hearing on witness misconduct and potential fraud. She turned to Nolan. Mr. Ward, you may respond. Nolan's lawyer, Harrison Dunn, stood, already sweating at the collar. Your Honor, we believe this letter could have been fabricated. It was not notarized. It surfaced late. And we have no way of verifying that Ms. Ward did not. That's a serious allegation, the judge interrupted. I'm aware. But given the timing, we have handwriting analysis, Hal said calmly, standing. We submitted a match report this morning. It confirms, with 99.9% accuracy, that the letter was written by Eleanor Ward. Dunn paused, then sighed. In that case, he said, deflating, we request a settlement discussion in chambers. The judge blinked. Are you withdrawing your objection? No, Your Honor. We're asking for a delay while our client considers settlement. And just like that, Nolan's entire defense caved in. They weren't fighting to win anymore. They were fighting to control the loss. The judge agreed to a recess. I stepped outside to get some air. The sky was pale and dry, spring humming in the distance, like it hadn't been waiting on us to sort out our family drama. I was halfway down the courthouse steps when I heard his voice behind me. Camille. I stopped.
Turned.
Nolan stood there, alone. He didn't look angry. He looked tired. You didn't have to do this, he said quietly.
No.
You didn't have to do this. He looked down at the sidewalk, hands in his pockets. I was scared, he said.
Of what?
That she'd leave it to you. That you'd take it all and disappear. That the foundation would fall apart. That you'd turn it into some crusade. I blinked. She wanted me to have it. He nodded.
Yeah.
I know that now. He looked older than he had in weeks. Not broken, just human. For once. I held a pen, he said. When she signed the revision, I was there. I know. I thought she'd forget. Thought it was just a moment. She looked so small. And you made her feel smaller, I said. He looked up. And there it was, what I never thought I'd see.
Shame.
You win, Camille. I didn't respond. Because this wasn't a win. Not really. I wasn't leaving with a trophy. I was leaving with something heavier.
Truth.
Legacy. Responsibility. He stepped closer. So, what happens now? I met his gaze. You step aside. And, the foundation? We share it, I said. If you can do it honestly. If not, I'll run it myself. He hesitated, then nodded. One slow, heavy nod. I'll talk to the board. And just like that, it was over. Not with a gavel. Not with handcuffs. But with silence. And truth. And a line neither of us could cross again. Later that week, the judge ruled in our favor. Probate was reopened. The revised will was admitted. The letter and second revision were entered into court record. Camille Ward, beneficiary, co-director, and daughter, officially, uncontested. The papers were filed quietly. No parade. No interviews. Just a notary, a signature, and a name that finally belonged where it always should have been. A month after the ruling, I returned to the cottage alone. No more courtrooms. No more statements. No more silence. The gravel crunched beneath my tires as I pulled in, the vines now just beginning to sprout green again under the spring sun. The air smelled sweeter, less like tension and more like lavender, dirt, and things trying to grow. I stepped out slowly, taking it all in. The shutters I once saw, as faded, now looked timeless. The porch swing creaked softly in the wind. The chimes, tangled for weeks, had been untied by someone on the grounds team. Maybe Hal, maybe me, I couldn't remember. They rang now, light and melodic, like the house was exhaling. Inside, nothing had changed. Except me. I moved through the rooms like I belonged there. Because I did. Not as a guest, not as a backup plan, but as a daughter who was seen. Finally. On the table sat a fresh envelope. It hadn't been there before. The handwriting on the front was mine. I blinked. Then remembered. I had written it 3 years ago, during the last real conversation I'd had with my mother, back when things still felt salvageable, back when I thought she just didn't understand me anymore. I had slipped it into her coat pocket after she left my apartment, never asking if she found it. I opened it now, heart in my throat. I don't know what you want from me anymore. I don't know if I'm too soft or too loud or too different for this family, but I still love you. Even if I don't know how to show it right. Even if I feel like you stopped choosing me a long time ago. I'm not angry. I'm just tired of pretending not to care. I do. I care more than you know. Love, Camille. There were small creases in the paper, fingerprint-sized bends, and folds I hadn't made. She had read it. She had kept it. And somewhere between then and now, she had found her own way to answer. Not in a phone call, not in a dramatic reunion, but in layers of trust, in a hidden cottage, in a will she had revised not once, but twice, in a voice recording that echoed through a flip phone when I needed it most. I sat down on the porch swing with the envelope in my lap, letting the warm wind brush across my face. This wasn't revenge. This was restoration. Nolan hadn't shown his face in weeks. The Foundation's board had quietly announced a leadership restructure, placing both of our names at the top, though I knew he'd likely step back soon. And that was okay, because this fight was never about shutting him out. It was about being let back in, about being allowed to exist fully, in name and in legacy. I stood, walked inside, and placed the flip phone, still charged, still whole, into the small cedar box I had carved out of an old keepsake trunk. Then I slid it onto the shelf, just above Mom's journals. Not to hide it, but to honor it. It had done its job. 2 weeks later, I stood in front of a room full of strangers at the newly renamed Eleanor Ward Center for Women's Legal Aid, formerly the Ward Foundation HQ. I held a copy of the revised will in one hand and a lavender sprig in the other. The speech wasn't long. It didn't need to be. Truth doesn't always roar, I said, looking out at the audience. Sometimes it's quiet, tucked in envelopes, hidden in safes, left in voicemail folders we almost never open. But it matters just the same. A few heads nodded. A few eyes brimmed. I smiled. She left me a key, I said, voice steady. And for a while I thought that was all I had. But what I've learned is that keys don't just unlock doors. Sometimes they remind you that the house was yours all along. Applause rose gently, respectfully. No fanfare. No headlines. Just peace. That night, I returned to the cottage for good. I brewed tea, hung her old quilt across the back of the couch, watched the sun disappear behind the vines. And as the last light dipped below the hills, I whispered something I never got to say when she was alive. You didn't forget me. You just waited until I was ready to be found. The wind caught the words and carried them through the room. And in the stillness, for the first time in years, I felt home. If you've ever felt forgotten, overlooked, or silenced, remember this. Sometimes the quiet ones are just waiting for the right moment to speak. And when they do, the world listens. Like, comment, and subscribe if you believe the truth always finds a way, no matter how long it takes.